Hello everybody and welcome to Meanwhile in the West, my weekly series where I go through and read the letters to the editor in my local newspaper, the West Australian, and rip into the people who've written stupid letters. So, first one for this week, Bridge over the Quay, or should be quay. I like it. 19th of March 2014. Dr. Lindley Lutton, letters, 18th of March, is correct when he says the closure of Riverside Drive at Elizabeth Quay is an unmitigated disaster. A simple remedy would be to build a bridge that opens and shuts. It would be in the closed position during rush hour to take traffic and open when boats need access. Jim Laffer, Bassendean. Again, these are the kinds of letters that I read the newspaper for. So his simple solution is to build a bridge. That opens and shuts. I mean, the whole point of building the quay was to provide an uninterrupted water access through to parts of the city. Now, I'm not even in favour of the quay, but I think the whole idea of that, they got rid of the road because we are deprioritising the road transport through that area. That was the whole point of the quay, was to say, actually, this is not the way that we should build a modern city, is by emphasising road through traffic on roads through the CBD. And your solution is, yes, it's a problem with, it's caused traffic nightmares because everybody's trying to drive through a building site, so let's build a bridge. I love it. Next, a terrible theory, 20th of March 2014. I fear we will only know about the fate of flight MH370 when it flies into some structure somewhere in the world as a terrorist attack. Effectively, the plane was stolen, much as a car gets stolen. It is now sitting somewhere between Iran and Pakistan to be used at a later date. Really, no other scenario makes sense. A. Morovich, Winthrop. In fairness, this was before we actually did know what had happened to the flight. But even at that point, this was ridiculous. The plane was stolen, much as a car gets stolen. Yeah, people pinched the keys and then took off with it out of the garage. It's now sitting somewhere between Iran and Pakistan. What, in Afghanistan perhaps? Or and yeah, the idea that no other scenario makes sense when there's actually, it crashed into the ocean, there was some kind of failure, the pilots had, run out of air in their cockpit. I mean, all of these things make sense. Much more likely. Thank you, A. Morovich. Sex Crimes and Safety, 21st of March 2014. I was absolutely horrified to read the article about the release of TJD, a serial and violent sex offender who is at just 37 years of age, has 14 victims who are still suffering from his vile actions. How many victims must there be before a person with prominent psychopathic traits is locked away forever for community protection? Why is the safety of the women in our community not regarded as the highest motivation for denying this person any chance of living outside of prison walls? It was reading the statement from Judge Kevin Slate that astounded me most, in particular his assertion that a supervision order should only be placed on TJD if he, the judge, was satisfied the conditions set would adequately protect the community. Is adequate really good enough? Alison Egan, Burgoon. Yes, actually by definition, adequate is exactly good enough. That's what adequate means. And again, I've banged on this about this before, but again, locking people in jail for crimes that they have not committed is completely contrary to our legal system. And that is exactly what you're proposing. You're proposing that this person remains a threat to the community, that is, that he is likely to commit future crimes. And so to incarcerate somebody based on the likely future crimes, i.e. crimes they have not committed, is a very, very dangerous principle. Now, some may say that, yes, you're using the slippery slope fallacy. I'm not actually, because in law, common law, this is how laws are made, these precedents are set, and that is a very, very dangerous precedent to set. Also, the idea of prominent psychopathic traits, I assume you don't actually know Ms. Egan, that a great number of people in jail have prominent psychopathic traits. A great number of people outside of jail have prominent psychopathic traits. The predictiveness of whether the person will reoffend or not, based on their prominent psychopathic traits, is not all that crash hot. We know that lots of people tend to reoffend whether or they have them or not. And therefore, the idea that this would be a good solid basis for locking people away forever is probably one of the most egregious miscarriages of justice I can imagine, is to commit people for indefinite detention based on their psychological profile, i.e. not actually crimes that they've committed. Now, if you want to say that after 37 years and 14 of age and 14 victims, that maybe he should deserve to be locked up forever for the crimes he has already committed. That's a slightly different argument. And actually probably one that has been taken into account in the sentencing of him. And so the fact that he is being sentenced to these things in the first place would suggest that the judges are taking into account all the relevant factors, i.e. what he has actually done. Thank you. Safety precautions, 22nd of March 2014. Maybe I'm a little thick, but I fail to see how sticking a security bracelet on a persistent rapist's ankle is going to stop him raping. Should he strike again, it will be a case of locking the stable door after the horse has bolted. Keep these guys locked away, then they can't rape. Chris Wardle, Inaloo. No, you're probably actually not a bit thick. I don't think it's really been, a good job has been made of explaining to the general public why things like the monitoring of people on parole via ankle bracelets is actually effective, or on bail or remand for that matter. So the idea here, I mean, it does seem quite simple, this idea that how could possibly monitoring somebody via an ankle bracelet stop them from offending? The answer is that offending is, the decision to offend and the actions to offend come about as a result of psychological processes. And we can intervene in those psychological processes via things like putting on ankle bracelets. So the reason why it does actually reduce the rate at which people offend, and in a sense can stop people from raping, is because having the ankle bracelet on and knowing that they're being monitored actually does have an impact on people's behaviour. Now, does it absolutely prevent it? No. But anything short of locking somebody up can't absolutely prevent. And the idea that we should lock up everybody simply to prevent them from offending would quickly lead to a society in which nobody is allowed out because everybody's a potential rapist. And yes, in hindsight, when one person who has had an ankle bracelet on reoffends during that, people will look at that and go, look, we're locking the stable door after the horse is bolted. They won't see the hundreds of other people who've been wearing ankle bracelets where that has prevented them from reoffending. And they won't see the massive reduction in cost that has. Now you might say, well, what cost does it have? Well, actually in our society, everything has a cost. And that money can be freed up to be spent on things like policing, or so the money we don't spend on locking people up in the first place, we save money by putting ankle bracelets on. We can spend on rehabilitation of offenders so that they don't offend in the future. And so on a cost-benefit analysis, you can actually prevent more rapes by saving the money there and spending it elsewhere. So that's the argument for it. Now, whether you agree with that or not, fair enough, and I haven't actually presented any evidence, but that's the explanation for it. So no, you're not a bit thick, but people don't generally do a good job of explaining these things. Next, Seeking a Better Life, 22nd of March 2014. Steve Shilkin. Rest assured that those who can fly halfway around the world to catch a wooden boat to Australia have never rotted in a detention camp. Analysis of detention, letters 14th March. Half the world wants a better life, and that includes 100,000 Australians. If we can't give it to our own, we certainly are not responsible for unidentified backdoor callers. Gwen Moppet, Doubleview. Yeah, apparently only 100,000 Australians want a better life. The rest of us are quite happy having a worse life. Or actually, maybe that's fair. Maybe everybody else is happy with the life they've got. Yeah, and I think that's true. I think that if we can't provide a perfect life for everybody in Australia, we should do nothing to help people overseas. I mean, I take this approach in my own life. I think if I can't provide a perfect life for my family, I shouldn't help anybody else at all. Certainly not my friends, certainly not other members of my extended family. I mean, really, screw them. Until I can provide a perfect life for my son, I should do nothing to help anybody else. And, yeah, lots of people are flying halfway around the world to get on boats to come to Australia, including all those ones who come from Sri Lanka. I mean, all the way across the Indian Ocean by boat. Oh, that's right, no, they're not flying. In fact, most of the people who come here by boat haven't actually flown anywhere. They've come via boats and overland to get to Indonesia, to get to Australia. And a lot of them have come across, perilous sea journeys. So stick that in your pipe and smoke it, Gwen. Next, 7 Minutes of Hell, 24th of March 2014. I have just completed my postal vote for the Senate, and it is obvious the system needs reform. I voted below the line, which took about 7 minutes. It was arduous putting down 77 numbers. I don't think anyone could do this effectively in a cramped polling booth. N. Mueller, Rivervale. I love that. It probably took you longer to write this letter. It took you 7 minutes. Let that sink in. So between state elections and federal elections and this by-election, you've probably had to spend on a total of half an hour over the last 3 years. That's a grand total of, on average, 10 minutes a year. Oh my goodness. Which is a total of, I don't know, what's that? About 5 seconds a week filling out votes. Now, there's an obvious solution, Mr. Mueller. I assume you're a Mr. actually. Maybe you're a Mrs. Mueller. And Mueller. There's an obvious solution. Don't vote. If it's too hard, just donkey vote it. Just put a line through it. Just draw pictures of penises on it or something. If you can't take the 7 minutes, that's fine. I personally think that living in a very stable democracy that is incredibly well run compared to other democracy, modern, Western democratic countries around the world, I'm happy to take the 7 minutes. In fact, I'll even give you that 7 minutes. I'll throw in some extra. It actually takes me about half an hour to vote. By the time I've lined up, got the thing, voted, it's about half an hour. And you know what? I'm happy to spend half an hour on a Saturday. And last couple of times, I've had a toddler with me, and I've had to manage the toddler in the voting booth. And that hasn't been easy. And you know what? It was worth it. I think, though, there is a small point in that, is that, yes, 77 numbers is a lot, and my only real concern about that is if you miss a number or you duplicate a number, your vote is declared informal. And actually lots of votes, not a huge percentage, but possibly a significant percentage that ends up happening with. And so I do actually think there should be some kind of poll reform to eliminate that factor, just simply so that more votes are able to be counted. Thanks for the letter. Next one. Dilemma for doctors, 24th of March 2014. The Code of Medical Ethics is considered ideal conduct for a physician. It states that doctors treat the sick to the best of their ability. Allowing doctors to assist patients with suicide will encourage a lowering of these standards and blur the line between assisted euthanasia and murder. I can understand any doctor's reluctance to consider euthanasia. Rather served, done Craig. Yeah, okay, here's the thing. Allowing doctors to assist patients with suicide does not encourage lowering those standards, and it does not blur the line between assisted euthanasia and murder. And the reason I can say this with full confidence is that there are jurisdictions around the world, there are several countries and areas in the world where they have got assisted euthanasia, assisted suicide legislation, and there has been no blurring of line between assisted euthanasia and murder. The thing that everybody feared would happen has not happened. All you need to do, if you're going to bring in this legislation, is you just have very clear standards about what it means to assist a suicide and the conditions under which it can happen, and you have good oversight over that, so that there's full transparency and everybody's aware of what's happening and how the decision is made. And guess what? You get away with all of these problems. This is a slippery slope argument of the worst kind. This is simply gay marriage will lead to bestiality type argument. Yeah, you will let doctors assist people in committing suicide, therefore people are going to end up murdering them. It doesn't happen. But you're right, I can understand doctors' reluctance to consider euthanasia, especially in this climate, because there is no clear law on it. Well, in fact, the law is quite clearly against it. The moment you brought in a decent law that laid out the framework under which it can happen and which cannot happen, and made it clear and accountable, and so there was oversight from the AMA or similar in terms of some kind of ethical oversight to make sure that nobody's abusing the system, there wouldn't be any qualms. Doctors would be happy to do it, because vast majority of doctors want to help people who are sick and injured, and if a person legitimately wants to commit suicide and is of sound mind and mind, they should be allowed to do that. Now, there is a couple of caveats there, is that by definition we almost always infer that people are not of sound mind if they want to commit suicide. So you do need to be clear about how you're going to do that. So you do need to make sure that people are able to come to a rational decision to end their life. And that is not something that culturally we're prepared to do. Because up until this point, we have generally held that any person who wants to end their life must be not of sound mind. And so you do need to do some work there, but it's certainly not insurmountable, and several jurisdictions around the world have shown that it actually works rather well to give people the dignity of being able to choose when the manner in which they die. This should be one of these fundamental human rights, to choose, as much as possible, the way and the time and place in which you die. So anyway, that's enough for 1 week. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you've got any comments, leave them below, and I'll see you next week. Bye.